Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Today I just wanted to make a quick little video about Anji Mito's neutral and spatial control in Guilty Gear Strive, mostly because I've been getting asked a lot of questions on stream and in the comments below on my YouTube videos about how I typically deal with characters that are rushdown heavy or zoner heavy, and what steps I take to kind of get in their face and start applying my own pressure. My hope for this video is that a lot of Anji players will be able to implement these strategies into their own gameplay and really help them out in the neutral game and help get in on your opponents. But yeah, without a long introduction, let's get into things. So I feel like the first thing that we should definitely discuss when talking about Anji's neutral and controlling spaces Anji is he needs to think about what tools the opponent actually has. So I have Kai here as an example because Kai has a lot of the tools that most of the roster in Guilty Gear has. He has a projectile, he has a forward advancing slide attack. There's really good poke buttons that kind of make you scared to approach him because he could get really high damage off that. And obviously he has the DP. It's really important for Anji players to understand what tools their opponent has because it's your mission to kind of condition your opponents into making bad decisions for you to take advantage of. Whether that's jumping in the air, going for a projectile faster than they should have, or going for a long range poke and spinning on them to take that into your advantage. So starting off from full screen, typically around here or here I feel safe enough to just throw a butterfly, but as a lot of people probably know, the butterfly does not actually go full screen. So there's nothing really incentivizing the enemies into jumping or blocking or doing anything other than standing there and still waiting for you to approach them if that's what they want. There are some interesting qualities about the butterfly though that actually give it a little bit of an advantage when trying to play neutral. So typically when you throw out your projectile and it clashes with another one, both projectiles disappear. But as you've seen there, when I throw out my butterfly and it clashes with Kai's, it actually breaks into the second half of its form. So what you could really do with that is, like say you're around here for example, and you toss out your butterfly, or whoops, we toss it out from here, and Kai tosses a projectile a little faster than that, then it'll travel and we can kind of rush down there and sort of attack. But as you've seen there, when I tried to do that, we got low profile. But after blocking the low profile, I ended up catching him and we could take our turn. However, you definitely have to watch out for getting low profiles because even when you throw the butterfly, they can definitely still go underneath it. So things like, 2D, Jacko's 2D, or, so Bad Guy's Volcanic Viper, or Kai's Stun Dipper, things like that will probably go under it and catch you off guard if you're not careful. But, however, the same goes vice versa. You toss your butterfly, you can also go for a little 2D, or, 2K, and catch them off guard as well with your own little low profile. So now say your opponent throws out a big projectile like that, which, your bird still kind of activates, but it won't really beat out that projectile, making it to where you have to either jump or fight against it. So in those situations, I typically go for something like this. If it's, usually in those cases, it has to be a heavy fireball, kind of like Leo's heavy charged up fireball, or Kai's for example. So typically when I see a large fireball like that, I just tend to spin and try to jab and get in there to start my own pressure. So now what if you see someone jumping like a maniac? Now typically as an Anji player you probably want to go for, something like, right, in hopes that it hits. Because when it does, you get really big rewards and you can probably get a lot of corner carry off of it as well. However, at far distances like that, I would really advise against going for Ko, because more likely this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to see the opponent jump, you're going to go for it, and then something like that's going to happen, and then they get to start their pressure on you. Typically, you probably want to avoid that, and in my opinion, I think what's more useful than going for Ko at full screen distances like that is probably going for something like this. Now you see the opponent jump, just go for a forward P. Because in more likelihood, you're going to catch them running at you, and then you can do, more things. As opposed to just risking it all on Ko and then having that happen to you. So typically, even though you see someone jumping and you really want to go for Ko, because the rewards will be really good, I would advise going for forward P instead. And then, if the forward P misses and they still jump, you can always go for Ko right after. And, continue your pressure from onwards. Honestly, I think another thing that really helps Anji's neutral and space control are definitely his buttons. So typically, you know, when an enemy blocks, they'll backdash, and you can still catch them pretty easily with Anji's buttons. Especially in the corner, if they do something like this, you know, you can just, oh, whoops, just kind of continue your pressure from there. Or, you know, when you're like very far out and you throw butterfly, you're kind of just running in there throwing slashes to bait them out. You know, they might rush you, you want to kind of catch them off guard. A really good tactic I like to do is throw a bunch of slashes into backdash, and then when they least suspect it, I kind of go for that. Continue my pressure from there. One thing to note, as an Anji player, it really is your responsibility to condition the opponent to making mistakes to open them up. For example, right, here's a block string that typically a lot of people like to backdash. But what a lot of people also don't know is you can just do this. Kind of follow up and keep it your block string. So why is this important? Well, because you, as an Anji player, really want the opponent to play your game. So typically, if I know the opponent DPs a lot, I'm going to do things like throw butterfly and actually just sit there and block. If I know the opponent likes to grab a lot, then I'm going to rush in, jump back, and try to bait grab. And all these things really play into Anji's game plan, and I know it sounds like a very general thing to do, but for Anji, it's very exaggerated, mostly because of the fact that he has this spin. So your baits matter a lot more, because if you see them go out that far, then they might try to immediately attack, and it's your responsibility to know that and try to spin. And depending on the attack it is, like, you know, for Kai example, you could try going for a far slash and then you would successfully spin it. But if that's not the read that your opponent's trying to make, they could also just rush you down and grab you right back. So it really is a mind game against people playing Anji. One thing that I would like to really say that kind of hurts me to say, a lot of people don't respect Anji, so not respecting your opponent back definitely goes a long way. If you think that your opponent knows you're going to go for a simple low, pick them up, go for an overhead for some reason. If you don't have meter and you think it's a bad decision to go for an overhead, it probably is, but they're probably thinking that too, so they won't see it coming, and you can keep your pressure up like that. Now, I'm not going to say that that'll work every single time, but the times that it does are pretty consistent, and when you catch them off guard, then that's when you can really start your pressure. You know, after throwing so many overheads, they're gonna be conditioned to think, okay, well, he doesn't care if he has meter or not. So then they're gonna try blocking overheads, only for you to throw a low right after. So, when we start discussing zoners, that's when Anji's neutral and space control really start to become interesting. So, here I have Axel set to do a certain block string, discuss that, to that, to that, right? So normally, as any other character, you would probably have to block, block, and block. You'd have to deal with that from various ranges, from anywhere around the map. You know, even max range, right? So, boop, boop, boop. I would have to block. Now, in Anji's case, it's a little bit different, right? You can clearly just spin through this. Boop. And then start taking advantage of your opponent from there. I think it's really important to note in this situation that Axel probably has more screen control than I could ever hope to have in this scenario, right? Because I have to sit here and block or guess on the right spins while they get to actually just throw their moves. But the trade-off is if I make those right spins, then his neutral falls apart and I'm immediately in there where he does not want me to be. So why is this important? Well, because this is how you set up your mind game as Anji. Anji doesn't really control space on the screen by throwing around projectiles. He controls space on the screen mentally, I guess you could say. Because in situations like this, where Axels are jumping and you're just parrying through their moves, they need to really rethink and change their whole game plan, because they can't just be doing what they typically do against other people. And this kind of goes for like the whole roster, considering characters like Ram, Jacko, Happy Chaos, all those characters that typically have long range buttons or zoning techniques or projectiles have to really think about how they want to approach Anji as opposed to how Anji wants to approach them. Because realistically, there's nothing stopping me from just spinning through all someone's projectiles and just getting there ever so slowly. And it's not really difficult either. You know, I've spanned through a lot of Jacko minion tosses. I've spun through a lot of Axels online. Very good Axel players too, who actually just practice really well. Even at local tournaments, I fought a lot of Happy Chaoses that have just really struggled to reload their bullets or catch their concentration around me because I spin through one of their shots, grab them, and now it's my turn. So you really have to kind of show the opponents that you really can spin on everything that they're trying to throw at you, and that'll make them change their neutral in a big way. I would typically say it really becomes kind of difficult for Anji to get in on zoners when they have meter. So for example, you probably experienced something like this. So they've RC'd and now it's still their turn. So that's something you gotta definitely look out for when playing against zoners, but that's something you have to look out for when playing against anybody anyway. When somebody has meter in this game, you absolutely have to worry about them PRCing your spin into them just grabbing you and continuing their turn. But I'm gonna get into that a little bit later at the end. So when we start discussing rushdown characters is when I feel like a lot of Anji's weaknesses actually start to show. But it's definitely not hopeless for me. So I have Chip here, and typically, a rushdown character wants to get in on you in any way they can. Usually they'll try to approach you by running at you and hitting you with a special move that either leaves them advantageous, or if it hits you, they can begin their pressure off of. So for example, I have Chip set to do this. Oops. And normally you would just have to block both sides or just jump over, but they could also do an air version or an anti-air and catch you off guard like that. But for Anji it's a little bit different, as we can just, spin our way through anything, just dance our way through all of life's problems. So why does this start to become a bit of an issue for Anji against rushdown characters? Well, for one certain reason. I mentioned earlier in the video a couple of times that a lot of characters will typically try to grab Anji out of spin because they know it's a really good way to beat it, especially after it connects and you have a meter to spend on PRC, then you can probably counteract the spin fairly easily. And it starts to become really noticeable with rushdown characters. So, for example, alright, I have Chip set to do pretty much the same block string except for something different. But now Chip gets to rush me down because of his immense speed while I'm still spinning, and because I'm still spinning, I have to either sit here and block. I could try to back jump, but it also doesn't really mean that I'm that safe because he could just anti-air me. Or I have to learn to tech a throw, which is also very disadvantageous for me. So this is why rushdown characters against Anji, it really starts to show all its cracks, because a lot of the things that you could spin that you would assume would be your advantage end up getting you RPS'd, right? In RPS situations, like you have to actually play rock, paper, scissors against whether they're gonna strike, throw, or grab. This is also something that I'd like to bring up. Most of the time when you're facing rushdown characters like Giovanna, Milia, Chip, they have very, very fast 2Ks and 2Ds. So typically in situations like this, where you're just doing your Anji's pressure, and you don't really want to continue Fujin, you will get poked out of it almost immediately if the player is good enough. And it kind of goes bad for other situations too, because with the recent patch and them making Nagiha's space a little differently, a lot of people can still just 2K 2D you and make you a little disadvantaged even though you were just doing your block string. So honestly, it might be in your best benefit to kind of hope that the opponent FDs a little bit just to space you out wide enough to where they can't 2K 2D you. In which case, my advice would be, if you are certain that they're probably going to go for that option, you don't think they're going to jump, just throw them off guard with one of these and continue your pressure from there. Yeah, that would definitely be my advice for rushdown characters, because there's not very much you have to do. Like I said earlier, you have to understand what your opponent's tools are and how fast they are and how they react to your spin. If you don't, then it's kind of hard to read a lot of situations that you're thrown at. A lot of people typically do just resort to easy throw option whenever they see spin, so it's kind of your advantage to take advantage of them and throw something different. But for a lot of the time, you really have to play a different kind of game when you're playing them, more than anyone else. The last thing I'd probably like to say about rushdown characters is that is what they are. They're rushdown characters. So really, don't be afraid to just throw your slash out there and just try to catch someone off guard. You see them running at you, there's a good chance they probably suspect that you're just gonna spin and will try to run at you and grab anyway. So if you see someone just full force sprinting towards you, I would try to take advantage of that and throw out a slash or two. Yeah, so hopefully some of that advice will kind of help you guys play a little bit neutral and understand some spatial control as Anji. That's just typically some of the stuff that I really do. If there's anything else that you guys would like to know, then please just ask in the comments below. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that I see, and if I have any knowledge, I'm more than happy to share it with all of you. Realistically, I think Anji's neutral is actually very decent and very good in the game. I think that he sets a standard that no one else in the game does. I think that you have to play against him in his way more than anyone else in the game sometimes, except for maybe characters like Happy Chaos or Axel. But even characters like that, he still has his own way of fighting back and conditioning other opponents to playing his game, which is just really fun and why I really love playing the character. But yeah, with that being said, I think I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you for everybody who tuned into the video. I really appreciate the support. Hopefully I will catch you in the next one. See you guys.